Hey everyone, before I actually get into dealing with this very important article, and the reason why I consider it quite important is not just the content that's contained within the article, but the fact that I'm going to be starting a new series on my Canadian Libertarian YouTube channel regarding the overarching premise of the social contract. And I've titled this new series, The Mythical Social Contract. Let's talk about it. I'm already getting a substantial amount of interest, which of course makes sense considering all the talk lately regarding the Great Reset, right? Some very fundamentally important questions need to be talked about, discussed, and answered regarding what is government? What is its relationship to the people in any given country? What is its role? Is it even legitimate? And is there genuinely an actual social contract? I think you know my thoughts on that one. And I'll definitely be expanding on them as well as listening to other people's perspective as well during the course of that series. In the interim, though, let's deal with this article of the National Post. Headline: Ethicists debate whether anti-mask protesters should forfeit COVID-19 medical care. If you're a real believer in liberty, then you have to say, I'll pay the price. It's reported by Sharon Kirby, December 1st, 2020. Where to begin on that one, right? Well, let's just start out first and foremost. Even if you're anti-mask or an anti-mask protester, why would anyone come up with the idea or the concept that you should have to forfeit medical care just because you disagree, even if you suggest that it's just science, which it's not, folks, because we're seeing constantly, and I can prove it, or you could just look up on the internet yourself, or use any venue that you need to find out that, yes, doctors, healthcare experts, or people in the healthcare field, epidemiologists, scientists, they have disagreements, folks. It's not as uniform as the establishment hacks in the media or the political class try to suggest. Not even close. So there's definitely disagreements by people who all claim to be experts or knowledgeable in their particular fields. But the fact of the matter remains is you're forced to pay for the healthcare system in modern day Kazakhstan, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with a tremendous amount of things. So let's first of all, let's back this conversation up just a little bit and maybe start to get to the point where it's like, why do you feel that you have any legitimate authority to plunder my economic prosperity, my wealth, or my income to pay for any of this shit? Because if you didn't force me into it, then you wouldn't be able to put on rhetorical nonsense such as this. Anyways, folks, let's dig down the article because I guarantee I still got lots more to say. This past weekend, hundreds of Albertans rallied against masking orders. Demonstrators gathered outside a house in Montreal's posh westbound neighborhood they thought mistakenly belonged to Quebec's premier, while in Ontario, police and bylaw officers saw to an illegal 60-person party at a Mississauga Airbnb. Some guests fled as police arrived. 27 others were slapped with $880 fines, and the hosts issued summons carrying minimum $10,000 fines. These antics, tweeted Peel Deputy Police Chief Mark Andrews, helped no one. First of all, let me just say this is another thing when you're talking about the police. The police in this country, I don't care if they're local, provincial, or federal in terms of jurisdiction, they all function under the forced wealth and income redistributive model. In other words, their entire paychecks, their income, their budgets are a direct result of that threat of force or ultimately theft, which is what government represents, folks. Because that's what government is at the end of the day. Once again, I can't say this enough times. Government is force. The thing that gives politicians power to do things that you could never do without being charged criminally is the pretense that government is somehow legitimate to do these things. Which, once again, if something's wrong, does it matter what your position is? It should be wrong, right? That's the thing. When you're telling people that things are wrong, like theft is wrong, but for some people it's okay, well, that's why you end up in a completely, profoundly sick and insane society, or basically world that we currently live in today. And I think most people, regardless of which side they align with, understand and recognize that. Given all that, some ethicists have argued that people who flout or publicly protest pandemic public health measures should willingly forfeit medical care in favor of those who play by the rules. So ethicist, right? So what, are you anti-ethics, right? Because, I mean, if you're an ethicist, it should mean that you promote ethics, right? Or at least should understand ethics, right? But then this is the part where they're trying to skate or skirt, actually admit that they love to compel it, but then they realize, oh, well, that would go against the fact that I claim to be an ethicist. So they're saying that you should willingly forfeit, right? They're not going to say they want to force you to not get medical care if you dare to protest, right? Because that's what they're even suggesting protesting. And protesting is a natural, inalienable, and inherent right? You should have the ability to protest your government. But according to this ethicist, well, maybe you should give up your right to health care. Maybe you should die, motherfucker, right? Because, I mean, if you're giving up your right for health care, which that's the other thing, you don't actually have a right to health care, right? That's another thing this ethicist doesn't seem to understand. No, you don't have a right to force anyone to provide anything to you, right? So, anyways, ethicist is my ass, just like expert. And the fact they both start with E, well, coincidence, perhaps, right? But come on, ethicist? Not really. Not based on what I'm reading here so far. But yeah, basically he's suggesting, or she, that you should forfeit. You should die in a ditch for daring to protest against big government, their mandates, their edicts, or orders. Should hospital resources become strained? An average of 2,111 people with COVID-19 were being treated in Canadian hospitals each day during the past week. Well, like, that's another thing when you talk with the hospitals. Okay, stop forcing. I'm one perfect example here. Stop fucking forcing me to pay for these fucking socialized healthcare systems. Like I say, I can't stand that. I've already, listen, I'd be way ahead of the game, especially anyone that's lived a fairly healthy life, right? You've been spending, it's just like if you're a good driver, right, with insurance. Like, if you've never done anything wrong, you constantly have to pay out at higher levels on a continuing basis for those who are not as competent or maybe more accident prone. This is the divide that I've always had a problem. This is the problem with collectivism and these kind of collective endeavors, is it literally tries and attempts and fails massively in terms of respecting all of our sovereignty and our individual merit or competency. Is when you try to collectivize and force everyone into a one-size-fits-all approach, like the harm that's done, the people, this is the thing, the people that benefit from that stuff are usually the people at the bottom end of that, right? Whereas the people at the top end, right, the more, like I say, the more competent and responsible, you're punished. Whereas the bad actors, they benefit. That's the problem with all these socialist or socialized systems. It's the parasites, it's the plunderers, it's the people who lack morals and ethics are the ones that seem to always benefit. Whereas the ones who are more competent, right, maybe less willing to run to the doctor's office for something stupid because they're like, oh, I don't want to waste it, right? The people who are thinking more critically about these issues and maybe trying to save a buck or two, well, you're punished and penalized because someone else is going to vacuum that shit up. So it's either you get it or someone else is, right? That's a terrible, terrible precedent. That's a terrible way to run anything, which is why no business works in that way, only governments. We're not saying don't treat Arthur Kaplan, founder of the Division of Medical Ethics at NYU School of Medicine, said Monday. We're saying if you're going to run around and claim exemption to endorsed and established behavioral policy, you should volunteer if you get sick to go to the end of the line. And why the fuck is this idiot in the National Post in Canada reverencing some idiot, right? At NYU School of Medicine, once again, the establishment media, what it is you can find, hey, when you want to espouse rhetoric, I assure you, you can always find someone out there. There's always going to be one or at least a few people out there that'll agree with you no matter what kind of insanity. Hey, if you want to promote fucking the most insane shit on the planet, I assure you can always find someone that will agree with you and parrot the same political talking points. And that's what the hacks and the establishment media constantly does. And CBC, the Globe and Mail, Global News, the CTV, they all do the same. When you see those experts on their panels or those political pundits, well, they selectively chose particular people to bring on for a reason, because they know the kind of rhetoric and shit that they stand for, and that's what they want to promote. That's why you'll never hear someone like me on there, because they don't want anyone to hear what I've got to say, or people like me, right? They want to be able to construct a narrative, tightly control that, and that's how they maintain The ability to dominate and influence your mind to the point where you're never thinking critically about any of these issues. You're always yielding and conforming to their opinions, to their experts, to their edicts, and to their will. Well, I mean, come on. As a human being, don't you have a little self-respect? Don't you have any dignity? Because if you do, I would suggest it's much wiser and more prudent to actually think critically about these issues rather than delegate that responsibility to someone else on your behalf. Anyways, folks, I'll put a link to this article in the description of the video below. Like I say, I'm going to be doing a whole series of interviews. And like I say, I've already got a fair amount of interest so far. And it'll probably be, the first one might start not this weekend, but next weekend. It's all about coordinating our schedules with the folks that are already showing interest in it. But anyways, like I say, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video below. And thanks for you folks who do get a chance to watch this stuff. And please do share it, because this kind of stuff, this kind of information is vitally important. And like I've said so many times before, in the age of information, ignorance truly is a choice. And you know what? Let's help out our fellow Canadians, because we recognize it'll help us as well by expanding on their knowledge and their understanding of these issues, so that they too can think more critically and make much more wiser, prudent, and informed decisions and opinions based on that big old world and how it unfolds around them. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.